The maid begged her to stop, but what the millionaire's fiancé did to the baby left everyone shocked. Please, don't do that." Hannah's voice was hoarse, each word torn out of her throat. "He's only 8 months old." Natalie didn't even pause. Her fingers tightened around Logan's tiny wrist, squeezing until the baby's soft skin turned pale. The platinum bracelets on her arm clinked together, producing a cold, elegant sound, far too luxurious for such cruelty. Logan had stopped crying. His wide eyes were fixed on the ceiling, his small mouth slightly open as if searching for air. The silence hit Hannah like a blow. Her legs weakened so badly she had to steady herself against the cabinet to keep from collapsing. Natalie finally turned around, her calmness chilling the room a few degrees. She released Logan, smoothing the silk of her deep blue dress as if nothing had happened. "Did you see anything?" Hannah wanted to answer, but her throat locked. Every instinct screamed at her to rush in, grab Logan, and run far away from this house, this woman, this tightening danger wrapping around her life. But Natalie continued, her voice sharp as a blade scraping metal. "In Rowan's house, loyalty is the only thing that keeps someone here. The truth does not." Hannah bowed her head on reflex. A bitter sting rose up her nose. Natalie's expensive perfume still lingered in the air, but beneath it was something else, an unspoken warning that one wrong step would end her life as she knew it. When Natalie left the room, Hannah trembled as she approached the crib and gently lifted Logan into her arms. The baby pressed his cheek against her chest, his breath faint and unsteady. "It's okay. I'll keep you safe," Hannah whispered, though she knew her promise shook as much as her hands. And when Logan blinked, his dark eyes looking up at her, no blame, no plea, just looking, Hannah felt something crack open inside her, like a seed splitting in the dark soil. Painful, but alive. 3 weeks earlier, Hannah hadn't even known that the White House at the end of the hill existed. She had been living in the south of Chicago, in an apartment so small she had to turn sideways to pass between the bed and the kitchen. The old building had no elevator, its hallways were dim, and the smell of fried chicken from the ground floor shop clung to the curtains and her coat. In winter, the wind slipped through the window cracks, keeping the room cold, even though she had taped every edge of the glass. Glass. Hannah had always hated glass, not because it was cold, but because it reflected. Because every morning, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a 27-year-old woman with dark circles like ink stains, hair tied in a rushed knot, lips pale. She saw someone slowly becoming a shadow of herself. She woke up at 5, showering with cold water because the heater had been broken for months. The cold made her skin prickle, but the sensation was better than the emptiness inside. The cold reminded her she was still alive, even if living meant dragging herself through endless days. Before stepping out each morning, Hannah always paused in front of the photo frame by the door. In the picture, her mother, Linda, was beaming beside a small birthday cake, but that face no longer recognized anyone. Linda lay in St. Mary's Hospital, her memory slipping through her fingers like sand. Some days she didn't remember her own name, some days she didn't recognize Hannah, and every week Hannah's phone buzzed with the same familiar message. Billing Department. Notice of overdue payments. Hannah had nothing to pay with except time, and no one accepted time as currency. She had once wanted to be a lawyer. Back then, she sat in the university library studying case law, underlining sentences in red. She loved the idea that words could become a bridge between the weak and justice. She believed that if she worked hard enough, if she was good enough, diligent enough, right enough, life would answer her with kindness. But life was not a fair courtroom. It was a slippery road where people were pushed down by things that had nothing to do with morality. Illness, money, the absence of a father. Even after dropping out because she could no longer afford tuition, Hannah kept an old constitutional law book in her bag, reading whenever she could, waiting for the bus, on short breaks during shifts, or in hospital corridors while waiting for doctors. The lines she had marked in red were the only things reminding her she once had a dream. But dreams didn't pay hospital bills. The job at Rowan Cole's house came from a sudden call from the job placement agent. Wealthy family in the suburbs, 8-month-old baby, high pay. If you accept, you start tomorrow morning. Hannah had no choice but to answer, "I'll take it." On the first day, the iron gates opened. Hannah stood before the White House at the end of the hill, walls smooth as cream, floor-to-ceiling windows like slabs of ice, a meticulously trimmed garden. Behind the house was a pool, its surface flat as a mirror. Inside, the silence was not peaceful. It was control. Inside, the quiet wasn't tranquility. It was the kind of quiet that made people hold their breath without realizing it. Every chair perfectly aligned, every table spotless, everything arranged with an invisible precision that felt like someone was monitoring every detail. Natalie greeted her in the foyer, a white dress, hair in a tight bun, scrutinizing eyes. "You're the new nanny?" Natalie asked without a smile. "Logan is upstairs. He cries a lot. I hope you'll do better than the last one." Then she handed Hannah a printed sheet of rules, feeding schedule, sleeping schedule, a list of prohibitions. The last line was underlined. "Confidentiality is part of the contract." Hannah tightened her grip on the sheet of rules as she walked up the stairs. The nursery door swung open. In the brightly lit room stood a white crib. Logan lay inside, tiny, unnervingly quiet for an 8-month-old. His wide eyes were open, not crying, not moving, just staring into empty space, as if he had already learned that crying brought no one. Hannah gently lifted him into her arms. He was light, far too light, as if he had grown used to not being held. Logan's tiny fingers curled around her thumb, tight, desperate. In that instant, Hannah knew her life was about to take a different turn. This child was silent, because he was used to being unheard. The days that followed passed like thick fog. Hannah woke before dawn, preparing bottles, changing diapers, rocking Logan to sleep. Slowly, he grew accustomed to her. Every time she entered the room, Logan smiled, a toothless, fragile little smile, like a thin ray of sunlight, piercing heavy clouds. Natalie rarely touched him. When she did, her hands were rigid, metallic. Logan immediately recoiled, shoulders lifting as if trying to shield himself. Rowan, Logan's father, was a ghost of a man. He appeared in suits, always with a phone in hand, eyes exhausted, voice sounding as though he were perpetually between two meetings. Hannah saw him perhaps twice a week, sometimes only briefly in the kitchen. Once he looked into the crib and said, "Son," but his tone sounded more like he was acknowledging an unfinished project. Hannah didn't hate Rowan. She pitied him. He seemed like a man running endlessly on a treadmill, running so he wouldn't have to look at whatever was behind him. In this White House, everyone was running, except Logan, who couldn't run at all. And then came the night that changed everything. Hannah was in her room when she heard a choked cry from Logan's room. She opened her door and ran into the hallway. Suddenly, the crying stopped. The abrupt silence chilled her to the bone. She pushed open the nursery door. The soft amber nightlight glowed. Natalie stood beside the crib. Logan lay there, eyes wide open. Natalie's hand was wrapped around his wrist. After Natalie left, Hannah lifted Logan into her arms. She saw faint purple marks on his soft skin, finger marks, not an accidental scratch, a mark of control. That night, she couldn't sleep. In the small maid's room, Hannah sat with her back against the wall, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. These hands held Logan. These hands had signed a contract of silence. These hands had once underlined a sentence in her law book: protect the vulnerable. She opened the book, flipping through the pages she had marked. The words suddenly felt sharp as glass. Reading them felt like being cross-examined by her own conscience. That night, for the first time, Hannah typed into her phone, "How to report child abuse anonymously." She read, then deleted her search history. Deleted it like someone erasing their own footprints. She felt sick with shame for having to hide, but she also felt something else, a spark of determination, small as a seed, but real. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tiny window with brutal honesty, exposing every corner she had tried to pretend was fine. Hannah tied her hair, put on her uniform, and went downstairs without saying a word to anyone. She needed to see Logan. She needed to make sure he was okay. When she opened the nursery door, Logan was awake, his eyes fixed on the mobile hanging above the crib. Hannah stepped closer, and the moment he saw her, he smiled. A little toothless smile, tiny but overflowing with trust. That smile shattered the last defenses inside her. She lifted him into her arms, holding him tight against her chest. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered. "I promise." But in her mind, Natalie's cold voice echoed, "In this house, people are paid to stay silent." Hannah closed her eyes. How much was a life worth, and how much was her silence worth? That afternoon, Natalie handed Hannah a bottle of milk. The liquid inside was strangely cloudy. Tiny particles floated in it, like dust. Hannah turned the bottle under the light. The smell wasn't sour, but there was something off, something medicinal. "Give it to the boy. Now," Natalie said, her tone casual. Hannah looked at Logan. He reached for the bottle instinctively, trusting without question. Hannah felt her chest tighten. A child's trust could turn an adult into either a saint or a monster. "I'm sorry," Hannah said, choosing each word as if stepping on broken glass. "This milk, something's not right. I can make a fresh one." Natalie tilted her head. Her smile didn't touch her lips, only her eyes, cold and sharp. "Are you questioning me?" Hannah swallowed. Her throat was dry. "No, I'm just worried about the baby." Natalie stepped closer. One step, then another. Hannah felt cornered, even though the room was spacious behind her. "Your job," Natalie said slowly, "is not to worry. Your job is to obey." Hannah tightened her grip on the bottle. The plastic creaked. She thought of her mother, of the hospital bills, of the steady beep of the monitor, a reminder that time was slipping away. She thought of the rule sheet, the underlined line. Confidentiality is part of the contract. And she thought of Logan, the wide eyes staring into silence the night before. "I can't," Hannah said. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Natalie froze. For a moment, Hannah expected her to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled. A thin, papery smile. "Do you know how many girls like you have worked in this house?" Natalie asked. 11. They all thought they knew what was right. They all left without a reference, without a dollar. Some never found work again. She paused, letting the words seep in like poison. "Do you want to be the 12th? Hannah couldn't answer. Her hands were trembling. "I just want the baby to be safe. And I just want you to know your place." Natalie turned and walked toward the door. "Take tomorrow off. Think about whether you want to keep working here, because the next time you question me—" She stopped, looked over her shoulder, eyes cold as frost. "There won't be a conversation, only termination. And I guarantee no agency in this city will hire you again." The door shut with a hard, final thud. Hannah collapsed onto the floor, holding Logan tightly. He burst into tears, shattering the suffocating silence. Hannah let her own tears fall freely. How had things come to this? Why had a baby's life and her own future become two choices that could not exist together? That night, she didn't eat. She went to her room and locked the door. The locked room felt like a cocoon. She opened her law book, but the words swam across the page. All she could hear was her own breathing, fast, broken, like someone running from an unseen threat. She typed again, "Report child abuse anonymously." Read, memorized, deleted the history. For the first time since entering this house, her fear stopped consuming everything and slowly made room for something else. Willpower. A shrill phone ring jolted her awake at 3 a.m. "Ms. Hannah Carter?" a man's voice said, professional, cold. "Your mother, Mrs. Linda, had an episode during the night. We need authorization to continue treatment. Without additional payment, the hospital will have to transfer her to minimum care." Hannah closed her eyes. She saw her mother lying in that white hospital room, eyes unfocused, mouth calling the wrong names. "How long do I have?" she asked. 48 hours. The call ended. Hannah sat on her bed, staring up at the ceiling. A thin crack ran across it, like a cut in the skin. 48 hours. 2 days to find money she didn't have. 2 days to choose, her mother or Logan. Tears slid down her cheeks before she even noticed. The next morning, when she walked into the kitchen, the atmosphere felt different. Rowan was already home. He sat at the table drinking coffee, eyes fixed on his tablet. Morning light through the glass made his face look pale, almost fragile. A spark of hope flickered inside Hannah, small, like the flare of a match. If she could talk to him privately? If he would listen? If he saw the marks on Logan's arm? "Good morning, Hannah," Rowan said, not looking up, but his tone softer than usual. "Good morning, Mr. Rowan." Hannah hesitated, twisting her hands together. May I speak to you in private?" "Of course. What is it?" She had just opened her mouth when Natalie walked into the kitchen. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair loose, her smile flawless, as if rehearsed. She wrapped an arm around Rowan's shoulders and kissed the top of his head. "Good morning, love," she murmured. Then she turned to Hannah. "Hannah, I think you should take the day off. You've been working too hard. I'll take care of Logan." Hannah's blood froze. "That's not necessary, ma'am. I'm fine." "Take the day off," Natalie repeated with a gentle smile, though her eyes carried a message sharp as a knife. "Leave. Don't interfere." Rowan nodded automatically, unaware of how the air in the room was being strangled. Hannah wanted to shout, "Logan is not safe," but the words stayed trapped in her throat. She only nodded, like someone under a spell. She went upstairs, locked her door, sat on the floor. She needed proof. No amount of words could stand against Natalie in this house where money was the law. In her drawer, there was an old phone she had bought from a thrift store. It still worked, though it had no important apps. A thought flashed through her mind. If she hid it in Logan's room, if she placed it correctly, if it captured the truth, then maybe, finally, justice would have a chance. That afternoon, while Natalie was at the spa and Rowan was shut in his office, the thick glass door reflecting the whole house like a mirror, Hannah stepped into Logan's room. The baby was fast asleep, his tiny hand curled into a fist, as if he had to protect himself even in his dreams. She placed the old phone behind the stuffed bear on the shelf, adjusting it carefully so the camera captured the entire crib. Then she whispered the prayer her mother used to teach her. "Please protect the innocent from all harm." She left the room, closing the door softly, like a breath. When night came, Hannah pretended to rest in her room, though the door stayed slightly open. She listened, alert, like a small creature sensing a predator. Around 10 o'clock, footsteps in the hallway. Heels. Natalie. Hannah waited a moment, then slipped out, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She walked to Logan's door. Through the narrow crack she saw Natalie standing by the crib. The woman held a small bottle. Hannah held her breath. Natalie opened the cap. She used a dropper to draw out the liquid, then leaned over Logan. Hannah shoved the door open. "Stop!" Natalie flinched. The dropper fell, rolling across the floor before coming to a halt. The two of them stood there, one terrified, one furious, neither moving. Then Natalie smiled, that cold, familiar smile Hannah had come to dread. "You're not allowed in here, Hannah." "What are you dripping onto his face?" Hannah's voice trembled with anger. "A mild sedative. He fusses at night. I'm helping." "You're lying." Hannah stepped forward. "I've seen the bruises on his arm for a long time." Natalie tilted her head, eyes sharp as a blade. "And who do you think people will believe? A broke nanny drowning in debt? Or Rowan Cole's fiancé?" Hannah's knees weakened, but she stayed standing, clinging to the edge of her courage. Natalie moved closer, close enough that Hannah could smell her perfume. "I know your mother," she whispered. "I know she's at St. Mary's. I know you need money." She opened her purse, pulled out a thick envelope, and set it on the table as if placing a purchased heart. 100,000, Natalie said. "Cash, enough to keep your mother in treatment. Enough for you to leave here and start over. Just disappear tomorrow morning and never open your mouth." Hannah stared at the envelope, then at Logan, the sleeping child who trusted adults so completely that he didn't know they could be monsters. Her hands shook so badly she could barely breathe. 100,000 was her entire life, but it was also the price of betraying the truth. "Well," Natalie extended the envelope, "do you choose the money or trouble?" Hannah inhaled deeply, and for the first time in her life, she chose not to follow fear. She refused. Natalie's face darkened. "You don't understand," she snapped. "I'm helping you. Your mother lives. You stay safe. Everything works out." "Not for Logan." Hannah's eyes never left the boy. She looked at Logan again, his tiny chest rising and falling. A life so trusting, so unaware that adults could be monsters. A memory flashed, her mother on a summer afternoon, planting a small flower pot on their balcony. She handed Hannah a seed and said, "Plant it. It may be small, but it knows how to find the light." The seed. Hannah remembered the feel of damp soil on her hands, her mother's belief that something so small could grow into an entire garden. Natalie's composure finally cracked. "You think you're some kind of savior? Rowan will never believe you. No one will." Hannah spoke slowly. "Then I'll make them believe." She turned and ran. "Rowan!" Her voice echoed through the hallway. Natalie chased after her. "Hannah, don't ruin your life." The office door swung open. Rowan stood at the top of the stairs, irritated at being interrupted. "What's going on?" Hannah stopped on the steps. "Sir, you need to see something. Right now." Natalie approached, her tone dripping with sweetness. "Love, she's just emotional. Her mother is in the hospital and—" "Hannah?" Rowan interrupted. "What do you want to show me?" Hannah swallowed. I placed a phone to record in Logan's room. I saw Natalie trying to give him something. I have proof." The air froze. It felt as though the White House, usually so controlled, had suddenly lost power. Rowan looked at Natalie. "Is that true?" Natalie gave a soft, offended laugh. "You're going to believe her? A nanny?" "I'm not asking you to believe me," Hannah said, her voice steady in a way she had never heard before. "I'm asking you to watch the video." Rowan stood silent for a long moment. Then he walked down the stairs toward Logan's room. Hannah followed. Natalie followed too, but her face had changed. Paler, tighter, her smile starting to crack. In Logan's room, Hannah retrieved the phone from behind the stuffed bear. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't stop. She found the file and pressed play. On the small screen, Natalie entering, opening her bag, taking out a small bottle, using a dropper, leaning over the crib. Rowan stood, frozen. His jaw tightened. His breathing grew heavier. When the footage showed Natalie bringing the dropper close to Logan's face, Rowan shut his eyes. "Turn it off," he said hoarsely. Hannah stopped the video. The room fell silent. Only Logan's steady breathing filled the air, soft and rhythmic like a tiny clock. Rowan turned to Natalie, and the look in his eyes was enough to make anyone tremble. "Explain," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. Natalie opened her mouth, but no words came out. It was only—" The smoothness of a manipulator was gone. Hannah spoke. "I saw the bruises on Logan's arm. I saw her hurting him." Rowan looked at Logan. He knelt beside the crib and lifted the baby's small arm. The purple marks were unmistakable, ringed with faint yellow edges. Finger marks. His eyes reddened. He rose to his feet, looking at Natalie as if she were a stranger. "Get out of my house!" Natalie backed away. "Rowan, please!" "Now!" he snarled. Natalie looked at Hannah. In her eyes there was not only anger, but fear. The fear of someone who had just lost the key to every door she controlled. "You ruined everything," she whispered. Hannah felt tears well up. "I saved a life," she said. "That's what I was supposed to do." Natalie left the room. Her heels struck the floor like nails closing a coffin. The front door opened and slammed shut. Silence fell, but for the first time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of truth. Rowan sank into the chair beside the crib and covered his face. His shoulders shook. Hannah stood at the doorway, unsure whether to leave or stay. She felt like someone who had just swum across a freezing sea and only now realized she was trembling. "Thank you," Rowan said, voice breaking, still not looking up. Hannah cried softly. I only did what was right." Rowan lifted his head. His eyes were red, hollow, like a room long locked that had just been opened. "You did more than that," he said. "You saved my son, and you saved me from my own blindness." That night, Rowan called the police. They collected the bottle, sealed the dropper, inspected every corner of the nursery. Hannah recounted everything, every detail. When the report was finished, the investigator looked at her with deep respect. "Not everyone has the courage to do what you did." Hannah only nodded. Courage wasn't what she felt. It was desperation turned into action. It was love for a child, not of her blood. It was the refusal to stay silent in the face of evil. After everyone left, the White House felt quieter than ever. Hannah didn't return to the maid's room. She sat on the living room sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring through the glass at the pool, where reflected lights shimmered like a dark mirror. In the water, she saw her own reflection, small, exhausted, but no longer disappearing. Around 3 a.m, Rowan came downstairs carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one in front of her and sat across from her. Neither of them drank. "I called my sister," Rowan said after a while. "Rachel, she lives in Evanston near the lake. She'll come tomorrow morning to help me take care of Logan while I deal with everything involving Natalie." Hannah nodded. She felt as though she had just stepped out of a locked room into a long hallway, uncertain but free. "Rachel suspected Natalie before," Rowan continued. "I didn't listen. I was too busy." He let out a hollow laugh. "Strange, isn't it? I've closed hundreds of deals. I read data, forecasts. I'm good at spotting risks, but I didn't see the danger sitting in my own child's crib." Hannah looked at him, seeing for the first time not a distant figure, but a flawed man standing in the middle of his own wreckage. Rowan stared into his tea, then spoke quietly. "Your mother. She's still in the hospital? Hannah nodded. Yes. You still owe money? She nodded again. Her throat tightened, as if the word debt were a tightening rope. Rowan stood, went to his office, and returned with a white envelope. It wasn't thick like Natalie's, but clean, simple. Her name was written on it in his handwriting. He placed it on the table. This is 6 months of your salary, plus a well-earned bonus. Not to buy your silence, not as an exchange. It's payment for your work and your courage. Hannah shook her head. I can't take this. You can, Rowan said firmly, because you deserve it. Hannah looked at the envelope. Her hands trembled. Tears fell again. Rowan continued, I saw your law book. You studied, didn't you? Hannah blinked. You saw it? In your bag, Rowan said, offering a tired but warm smile for the first time. When all this is settled, if you want to go back to school, I'll help. Hannah broke down completely. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face, feeling as though the weight of years had finally been lifted off her. Rowan didn't touch her. He simply sat there, giving her space to fall apart. When she could speak, her voice was barely audible. Thank you. Rowan looked at her gently. No, thank you. Outside, the sky began to pale. Light spilled into the room like a soft golden dust, warm and unjudging. It touched every dark corner as if whispering, This is enough for today. Around 7, Logan cried, the normal cry of a hungry baby waking up. Hannah rose instinctively, but Rowan stopped her with a hand. Let me, he said. I have to learn how to be a father. Hannah nodded, watching him go upstairs. She heard his tentative, gentle voice. Hey, buddy, Daddy's here. Logan laughed, a small, clear sound like a drop of water. Hannah felt her heart ache, painful but full of relief, knowing Logan could still laugh. She opened the envelope Rowan had given her. There was more money than she had ever seen, but what made her cry wasn't the money. It was the handwritten note tucked inside. Dear Hannah, you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but choosing what is right even when the truth hurts. Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for saving me. Rowan. Hannah folded the note and slipped it into her pocket, like placing a seed in her palm. She looked out the glass door. The pool reflected the brightening sky. The water was a mirror. But this time, when she saw herself, she didn't see a fading shadow. She saw someone who had just stepped out of a locked room. 6 months later, Hannah sat in a lecture hall at Chicago State University. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, falling across her notebook where she underlined a sentence about legal ethics. Her hand was steadier now, her mind no longer clenched by the darkness that once strangled her days. In her pocket, she always carried a small photo, Logan smiling, clutching a teddy bear. On the back, in Rowan's unmistakable handwriting, "Thank you for reminding us what truly matters." After selling the White House on the Hill, Rowan moved to a smaller home near Evanston, by Lake Michigan, where the blue water felt like a reminder that life could begin again. On weekends, Hannah visited Logan. The boy was learning to walk, each step slow but determined, as if proving that miracles were possible when someone lifted you with love. Logan clung to Hannah more than to anyone else. Every time he saw her at the door, he didn't hesitate. He ran, his unsteady little legs full of determination, straight into her arms. Rowan often stood a short distance away, watching them with a softened gaze. There were moments when Logan laughed in Hannah's embrace, and Rowan felt something in his chest unlock, a place long filled with ash, slowly warming again. Hannah's mother was still in the hospital. Some days she didn't recognize her daughter. Some days she looked at Hannah as though seeing the sun. Hannah learned to be grateful for even those scattered fragments of memory. They were small grains of light that kept her standing. And yet, some nights, Hannah still woke in a panic, She saw Natalie's hand gripping Logan's wrist, heard the cold clink of platinum bracelets. But each time the fear rose, she opened her drawer and took out her old law book. The red underlined sentences were still there, like seeds lying in the dark, waiting to bloom. One late autumn afternoon, after class, Hannah stepped out of the university gate. The sky was tinted soft gold. Fallen maple leaves formed a thin path before her. Rowan was standing there, a simple suit, his hair tousled slightly by the wind from the lake. In his hand, a bouquet of white tulips, the flowers Hannah once mentioned she loved, believing no one would remember. She froze, her heart skipping. "Rowan, what are you—" He stepped closer, his eyes gentle, but filled with resolve. "Hannah, I spent too long realizing the most important truth of my life." He drew a breath, gathering courage. "You didn't just save Logan. You saved me. You reminded me what it means to see, to love, to live honestly." Hannah opened her mouth but couldn't speak. Rowan knelt, right there at the university gate, where students slowed their steps, watching in astonished, quiet joy. In his hand, a simple silver ring glowing in the afternoon light. "Hannah Carter, will you let me build a life with you? Will you be my wife?" Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks, warm, effortless, as if every locked door finally swung open at once. Logan suddenly ran out from the car, grabbing her leg, chirping, "Mama! Mama!" Hannah laughed through her tears. She bent to hug Logan, then looked up at Rowan, the man, once broken, now standing before her like a new beginning. "Yes," she said, voice trembling but sure. "I will." Applause rose from the students around them. The wind off Lake Michigan swept through, as if carrying that moment across the world. The wedding took place the following spring, by the lake. White flowers lined the aisle. Logan wore a tiny suit, carrying the rings, his eyes bright as the water. As Hannah walked toward Rowan, he looked at her as if time itself had paused to witness. And when they exchanged vows, sealing them with a deep, tender kiss beneath the blue sky, there was no terrifying silence, no breathless darkness, only light, truth, and a love planted long ago like a single seed. Happiness didn't arrive like a fairy tale. They built it themselves. And sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough not to turn away, for an entire life to bloom.